Okay, so a warm welcome to Daniela Tomer, who is going to speak to us today about transitions and about what she does in working with internationals around identity and a variety of other topics. Daniela Tomer is the co-founder actually of the Global Nomads Network, and she offers her services in Hebrew, English, and Spanish. She has also served the Families in Global Transition Board. This is actually where we met in one of the conferences of Families in Global Transition. And she has now also been serving FIGT as the co-chair of the Counseling and Coaching Affiliate, which is one of the most successful affiliates of FIGT. Daniela, it's a great honor that you're here today. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about you?
First of all, thank you, Vivian. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so honored to share this space with you and just to try to promote this kind of work that we are both loving and sharing. So, a bit about myself. Um, my name is Daniela Tomer. I was born in Argentina, but lived since then in Israel, Europe, actually Belgium, and now in Boston, USA. Um, I'm a clinical psychologist, licensed both in Israel and in Belgium, and I work online with people all around the world. And I would say in the last 13 years, I dedicate my time working only with people that have some sort of connection or were impacted in some way by transitioning, international transitions and crossing cultures and actually facing these kind of challenges. And that led me also to FIGT and meeting you and many other people that I think shaped my path and my passion.
Indeed, and I will never forget your last presentation at the FIGT with Ruth van Regen when you talked about multiple identities, actually even within one family. Um, Actually, I want to mention this because I have heard that about you, but I haven't experienced, like I have seen it in my clients, etc. But I'd never thought that this was the case for my family until we had the first meeting of FIGT in Greece. And then, we were in a circle and I started describing myself as, as a Greek Assyrian who now lives in the Netherlands, etc. And then at the end of the circle, it was my sister who described herself only as Greek. And then I said to the group, okay, and she's also my sister. And I was a bit shocked and I didn't know what was happening. And I said, but we grew up in the same family. How is this possible? And then I talked to Ruth and I gave her a book of third culture kids. And then now she describes herself as a cross cultural kid as well. But I was shocked. Like, like me and my sister describe ourselves in completely different ways. So can you tell us a little bit more about that, about multiple identities and how this is possible to happen within one family and what to do with that when this is happening?
So this is I was smiling when you told this story because it's the kind of stories that I keep hearing again and again. Because even with ourselves, we might feel very different with the different parts of our identity according to the surroundings or the context that we're living. So and then we ask ourselves, is it really me? Am I the same? How come in one place I feel so predominantly like Greek, like you felt, and in other place you might feel other part of yourself and you're still you. So all these kind of experiences and very much impacted by my own life story, it became a really passion for me. And what I believe today is that really the world is changing in a way that our identities are shaped differently than in the past. In many ways, we are influenced by many cultures more than in the past. And we see more and more families that are exposed to different influences. And for that same reason, it happens in the family that each one has to find their own way and the way to hold themselves. And that's what you find that, different members of the family will build themselves, even with the same conditions and the same exposures, will finally find themselves presenting themselves differently, and also simply being attached to different parts of themselves in a different way.
Mm.
Um, I find it fascinating, and I find it even nowadays living in North America, and I'm I'm excited to explore even like another layer. So right now in the US, there is so much talk about racism, and how does it impact also our identities. And suddenly all this discussion that we were having among ourselves, among every, all the third culture, if you'd like, uh, gets a bit of a different attention and twist. Um, so I see it as a positive development, that people are more open to consider these different parts of our own identities, and I hope that it will become even um, more, I think, communicative, like that we can communicate it in an easier way. Um, to your question, so what do we do with it? I think we have to allow ourselves to tell our stories and to find a way to live properly with them. It's not enough just to tell the story.
Mm-hmm.
It's to find our own way. It's almost like what you were just sharing about your sister. You offered her a different angle to look at the same story, and it was up to her to decide what parts of it she can relate to and what will she pick, and if she wants to retell her story in a different way or not. So
True,
it's
true.
so
And to
this
find
is
the
what we're doing.
connecting thread among the multiple identities that we all have. Yes, and how we communicate. I think when we find the words to tell our story, like it's 50% of the process. Another 50%, I guess, is okay, now I've told it, and how exactly I present myself and what does this mean in my reality. I absolutely agree with you. And I think another part related to the identity, I think they go hand in hand sometimes, can also be the language. And I want to ask about this as well, Daniela, because I know that you have written, apart from the services that you offer for internationals in Hebrew, English, and Spanish, I know you have also written a wonderful article that perhaps we can share also as like below the article, the interview today, about why is it important when you do therapy, yes, to have someone who is expert specialized, but ideally to have someone who speaks the same language with you. And I know we share the same way of seeing this and same vision on helping internationals, but I have seen in my experience that some people need to be to explain to them why this is important and why someone who speaks the same language but is back home is not a good fit, or why only who is only expert specialized without speaking the same language perhaps is not an ideal fit either. So what would be your answer to this? Why it's important in therapy to speak our language?
So I think, first of all, it's a great question, and I know that we share the same feeling, but it's a challenge to explain it. But my way to explain it is that usually, when you're living in a monocultural environment, language and cultures go together. So you live in one place that you speak the language, and you share with the therapist the same kind of culture. What happens when somebody is relocating to another country is that you might share the language, assuming you will be moving, but your therapist will stay in your home country. So you will still share the language, but suddenly you're not really sharing the same culture, in the sense that you are, as an expat, trying to insert yourself in a different environment. You're influenced by that environment, you're influenced by that transition, and this is so significant in everything that is can be challenging in this point in life. But then your therapist is back in the home country, which you definitely can connect around the same values and ideas, but there is something that is missing, and that maybe it's harder to communicate unless you can really understand the different culture. So, by definition, when you are transitioning
Mhm.
internationally, you're exposed to another culture. It can be a local culture, And I know, don't mean to say by that that every therapist needs to know and be knowledgeable in every culture around the world, but I mean to the third culture. I mean to the common threads that we have among people that are living internationally. So
Mhm.
this part of transitioning, this part of being, having some sort of nomadic life, this part of uh, being a foreigner, regardless where you are in the world, is a very important and dominant part in every challenge in transition.
Yeah.
So that's the difference. And the other solution might have been, okay, you are already abroad and you speak the common language that might be English, and your English is perfect, it's good enough to work internationally, so why not do therapy in a foreign language? That's a valid question. But then again, it might feel that it's not accurate enough, because in therapy, obviously, we are trying to connect to the deeper feelings, and sometimes, it can be very emotional, it can be very delicate, it can relate to our past. And in these moments, if you have the advantage of somebody that can speak technically your language, and you are not trying to explain yourself or invest much energy in that, and knows the culture you're coming from, then it's definitely an advantage. So
Mm.
the combination of the two, in in my experience, it's huge.
Yes.
It's
Hmm.
and just as an anecdote, I want to share with you something personal. When I was just trying, even to explore this idea, I allowed myself, okay, I have to try. I have to try to go and to have some therapy, in English. Um, so I did, and it wasn't a bad experience, but it totally confirmed what are the challenges.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
felt that I had to work really hard.
Right. I mean, I absolutely agree with you that having the package of the expert specialization plus the language is the perfect fit. If this is not possible sometimes, my second option would be have it with someone expert specialized in English rather than someone who doesn't really get the whole expat experience, cross-cultural psychology, etc. At least in my personal experience, when I had one therapy with when I was in Holland and my therapist was in Greek, monocultural Greek. Back then, I haven't discovered the 5GT or the whole cross culture. I was much younger, and I felt that something was not right. He couldn't get it when I was saying that, I had a stomach pain every time I was leaving Greece and I had to say goodbye to my family. And he was like, okay, you'll be fine after 2 days. Like, he couldn't get the whole hidden loss grief part.
Mhm.
And then I had therapy with someone in English, but expat specialized. And at that point, I had also discovered my cross-cultural identity, and I felt much better. And of course, I offer now therapy in English, etc. So in my view, yes, it's ideal when you have it in both, like expert specializations and language. Second best, in my view, is always to have someone who's expert specialized, because we have seen so many people with negative experience in therapy, and that's why actually I wanted to give a floor to other psychologists that I respect so much as you, Daniela, so we can, pass on the right message to people and see, that yes, you can get help and have very positive experiences, and there are out there people who get you.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I think that this is maybe the right moment also to address the changes also in technology, and maybe through COVID-19, because at the time, and I remember when we met, these believe that it's the best combination to have it in your own language, but also with somebody that really understands, that led both of us to work through actually these kind of platforms like virtually. And
mhm.
I think a few years ago, it was a challenge. So at the time, I was, I think, much more challenged, trying to answer the question, is it really so beneficial that it's better than seeing somebody in person? And I think right now, definitely with the COVID crisis and people are getting more comfortable with this medium, I think this is the kind of a question that I don't have to answer as much.
Yeah, now we live in a very I think it's such a unique situation for all of us globally. Of course, I hope it passes very soon, but I guess right now, yes, I guess there is no other option. Or if it is, with some fear about COVID, etc. Having mentioned COVID, I wanted to ask you, since you're an expert in transitions, I want to ask you, transitions right now can be very difficult, and relocation because of COVID. Actually, I was talking the other day with Carolina Porto in one of the 5GT events, and she talked about the black belt move, about those moving right now are called like the black belt movers, etc. So I wonder, like, what would be the main advice you would give to people who are relocating right now or thinking of relocating soon in the midst of the pandemic?
So it's a good and hard question because many of the, I think, ways we use to support these people in transition or recommendation that we would make are simply irrelevant right now. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big believer of working with what we have and not with what we wish we had. And
Mm-hmm.
this is probably my best advice at this moment is just acknowledging the fact that you are transitioning in a very specific time, that if you'll keep on comparing what would have happened in a different reality, what kind of services you would get, what kind of communities would you will meet, so then it just leads to a lot of frustration. So best thing to do at this moment is just acknowledge the situation and understand, okay, what is there? And there is less in terms of in-person opportunities, both like opportunities to connect with people through schools, through activities and things like that. So it makes it harder. So the isolation that we usually feel in any transition, being newcomer, not having enough network in place, I think it's a double challenge right now. At the same time, the flip side of it is that people are more comfortable online, and then a lot of these networks are actually established online, so you can do many things ahead of time, things that we were not doing before. So take advantage of this reality.
Mm-hmm.
And the third thing I would say, and this connects me to also a big belief that I have. I do believe in, the connection of mental health and physical health. And I believe that, being active is part of protecting ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And if there is one thing that still COVID cannot take away from us, is the ability to be active. And in most part of the world, you can be outside and reach out to activities that are outdoors. And now more, this is always a recommendation of mine. Try to find some sports. I try to find some groups to do sport with. But today, in this kind of transition, I will say even more than before. This is the one thing that you can still do, and people are out there in different ways and in creative ways. Uh, but I think it's an amazing way to find communities, build communities, establish in some way the sense of belonging that it's so needed in this kind of transitions.
Definitely. And thank you so much for sharing these wisdom nuggets, because I think it's important for people right now to hear these things, that yes, no matter where you are, there are still opportunities for physical exercise. And sometimes if you're not allowed, because I know in some countries it's not allowed to even go outside on specific days of the week, I think it's important, even when you're at home, to do something that's physical exercise. For example, in the first wave of the pandemic in Europe, the first 32 days, I didn't even went out because I was so scared because of my asthma. And I was just dancing for 30 minutes at home. I didn't know what else to do in terms of physical exercise. So that helps. About the latter point of connecting now more than ever, I couldn't agree with you more. I think like whoever came up with the term social distancing, I disagree so much. I even wrote a blog post to Expat about it, about my strong disagreement, because I think it's about physical distancing, not social distancing. I think we need connection now more than ever. And your point about, reaching out to communities that are the right for us, I think that especially right now is the most important thing you can do. We're human beings, we need connection.
That's so true. I do understand we have to adjust. It's another adjustment. And this is, I think, the challenge of somebody that is transitioning right now is having, the normal challenges of any transition, plus transitioning to this other way of communicating and other way of building relationships.
Yeah.
So we both know that you can make a really successful transition, and we both know that we can really have wonderful connections and relationships through this kind of media. But it's a double challenge, and I know that, and I acknowledge that. And at the same time, every possibility to try to integrate even as little of hiking in the new area, just trying to do whatever is given. It's the best you can do in these circumstances, and I
Yeah.
totally
Mm-hmm.
support
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yes. And Daniela, we have agreed, to keep it short. I know the two of us can talk for hours and for a variety of topics. Like, I wanted to ask you so many things also about relationships or parenting. Um, but we need, I think, another half an hour to cover both. We wanted to keep it short and sweet for today. But I wonder if there is any other tip or message that you would like to give to the international community. I think our community as expats right now is suffering a lot because when we signed up as expats, we didn't sign up for, being stuck in one place, even if we want to jump on a plane and go back home, and this is not possible. Or if something happens with our family in another country, etc., that's not possible anymore so easily as it used to be. And at least I see in my practice that now there are more and more referrals. People are facing a lot of challenges. They're feeling, some of them are describing, they use the word trapped, like the sense of freedom is not there to the extent it used to be. What would you like to say to our community that, especially right now, is struggling?
So the first thing I would like to do is, first of all, acknowledge the challenge. I think when all this pandemic just started, I wrote an article exactly about that, about the added challenge that our community has.
Mhm.
And the one of the main reason is that actually we use travel as a coping mechanism for many things. In many ways, when you talk with expats, one of the ways to cope with different challenge is the hope of some sort of a closure or fulfilling of needs by traveling, whether it's to your home country or to some other place. So it's when you think about all these populations that are so nomadic, when you stop that, you almost take away a very inherent way to cope with different challenges.
Mhm.
Suddenly, there is no like this. We usually have this, okay, I know that by Christmas I will do that and that. So I kind of, it's like a race that you can give the last push because you see where it's over. And now it's not there. So we have to acknowledge that coping mechanism that we are so used to it is simply not there, that we have to deal different with what you mentioned, which is our constant grief, and that we are anxious as everybody else around the world, but we are holding also this anxiousness about other people in a very different way because we cannot really see them. So acknowledge it's really hard. Um, what else can we do about it? Everything that we just mentioned, just do the best you can do within this scope and use this medium of online communication as much as you can
Mhm.
to overcome that.
Yes,
But I
it will
want to
pass.
also,
It will pass. I think it's important to, remind ourselves and others that this will pass. It's not going to last forever. and to take it, I think, a step at a time, or a month at a time, a day at a time, until this passes.
And also, if possible, as an opportunity. Sometimes, reality pushes us to different way. And I actually see a lot of people that I'm working with that they were pushed to a different direction that they didn't think about. And I wouldn't say everybody, but some are super flourishing. So there is also an opportunity. We just have to be active and looking for them. But before we close, I think it's important for me to mention, because our relationship and the way we know each other, I really want to mention here FIGT as an amazing organization that I think supports exactly that.
Mm-hmm.
I can say that it's a great example of really connections that can make a difference. And even though many of the people at FIGT I've met in person, there are people now that are, especially through my work in the counseling and coaching affiliate, it's, as you mentioned, it grows so much that now I have a network of mental health practitioners that are spread all over the world that I didn't meet in person, most of them, and still these are very valuable and important connections. And this is the other thing that we can learn from that. We are both mental health practitioners, but in a way we are not connected to the local communities that we are in terms of like the organizations that we belong. So creating something that is multinational, that is connecting through this kind of platform, it's a wonderful way to create something new that wasn't there.
Yes, yes.
So
And of course, we operate internationally, but we act locally no matter what. So I think it's important, each one of us, I guess for expats who hear this interview right now, like to listen to us, that yes, you're international, but at the end of the day, you need to act locally and to also build connections there, and, use the best of what you have
and as a
available.
practitioner, I would recommend exactly that. So to invest in both, in the communities that will go with you no matter where you are. And
Yes.
this is my international network and my local network. And here in Boston, I'm lucky to be part of MIP, which is the Psychoanalytic Institute here.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have my local professional connection, but I will never leave my international one, because this is the constant for me,
Yes.
because who knows when we will be. So
Indeed.
that's, yeah.
Indeed, and I think with this last message is about, connecting locally and internationally, and that this what is happening to us right now is also an opportunity for growth. I think that's a very positive message to end today's interview. I don't know if there is something else you would like to add before we wrap up.
And maybe just mentioning Ruth Van Recken, that I keep on working with her since the moment we met many years ago through the conference. And she was definitely an inspiration, and she's the best supporter of all of us. And I want to thank her for what she did. And I hope to continue that journey that I think, in a way, I feel that she initiated. And we are just trying to take it to other directions with other languages, and all the great work that you are doing and all the rest of us are trying to do.
Indeed, indeed. I mean, okay, Ruth Van Reken is one of a kind. For those who perhaps don't know her, is the co-author of the book Third Culture Kids. Like, she's one of the founders of Families: A Global Transition. She has really dedicated her whole life serving the international community. I think those who don't know her, please Google her. There's so much wisdom she has to share. And yes, she has changed our lives in so many ways, because with what she did for the international community and the books she wrote and all the seminars, the webinars, the talks that she does globally, she really reached she reached to people who were internationals but couldn't identify themselves as such, as core cultural or TCKs or all of these definitions. That's the whole umbrella of who is international nowadays. Really, she has changed the lives of thousands of people around the world. And of course, yes, we love her and we thank her. So, Daniela, I would like also to thank you for being here with us today. For me, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Every time we talk, I leave our meetings with, more food for thought about, okay, what would be next, or what did I learn from that? I want to thank you for being who you are, for serving the international community, and I hope our audience, finds this interview as valuable as I did, and to enjoy it as much as we did. So, thank you. Take care. Stay safe. Stay healthy, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you, Vivian, for inviting me.
Bye bye.
Bye.